Hi everyone, welcome back to Life with the Cloud here. We are halfway through our deck reviews of Disney Villainous. We've gone through Maleficent, Captain Hook, and then last week was Prince John. This week we're going to take a look at Ursula. As always, in these videos we're going to take a look at board setup, the Villains deck, or in this case Ursula's deck, the Fate and Hero deck, and then also tips and combinations that you want to be looking out for. So let's begin and see what it takes to be part of Ursula's world. As we take a look at Ursula's game board, it's set up as if any other game board that we've already set up before, starting with Ursula's location here at the very first location, second followed by Eric's ship, third is the shore, and then followed by the palace here at the very end. For many of you who have been watching these videos, hopefully you immediately recognize that there is a lock icon here at the palace. Our initial reaction may be to think that there's something we need to do to remove the lock icon from Ursula's game board. However, Ursula plays uniquely is that her lock icon is never removed from the game board, but it moves between the palace and Ursula's lair and back to the palace. So back and forth between the two locations. Ursula's objective is quite simple. Her objective is to start her turn with the Trident and the Crown at Ursula's location. As we take a look at the Villains deck next, we will see how Ursula can achieve this goal. As we take a look at her Villains deck, or Ursula's deck, she only has 2 allies in her entire deck. The first one is Flotsam. So Flotsam's effect is move a hero from Flotsam's location to an adjacent unlocked location, strength of 4, and cost 2 to summon. And you have 1 copy of that card. Her second ally is Jetsam, the other eel. So similar cost to play, 2 cost to play, strength of 4, exactly the same effect. Move a hero from Jetsam's location to an adjacent unlocked location, right? The next we're going to take a look at is the effect cards within Ursula's deck. The first one we're going to take a look at is called Opportunist. And so you have 3 copies of this card. The effect of the card is simple. Choose an item or effect from your discard pile and put it to your hand. The next effect card that you see in Ursula's deck is called Grow Giant, which is perform 1 available action at the location adjacent to Ursula, even if the location is locked. And you have 3 copies of this card. Next, you have Change Form. Change Form is move the lock token to either Ursula's lair or to the palace. You have 3 copies of this card as well. Next is the effect card called Divination. And you have 2 copies of this card. Divination is reveal cards from the top of your deck until you get a binding contract. Put the binding contract into your hand and discard the rest of the cards. And the next effect that we're going to take a look at is called Whirlpool, and you have 3 copies of this card. And Whirlpool is quite simple. Move a hero to any unlocked location. Last but not least of the effect card, this one here, you only get 1 copy of this card, and it's called Poor Unfortunate Souls. You may move each hero to an adjacent unlocked location. The next set of cards we're going to take a look at are the condition cards within Ursula's deck. The first condition we're going to take a look at is called Arrogance, and you have 2 copies of these cards. Arrogant is during other player's turn, if another player defeats a hero of a strength of 4 or more, you can play Arrogance. You take 3 cards from your pile, and then you can discard any 3 cards after that as well. So gain 3 cards, pick whichever ones you want to keep, discard 3 cards equally as well. And you have 2 copies of Arrogance. The next condition we're going to take a look at is called Trickery. During other player's turn, if another player has 6 or more power, you may play Trickery, reveal the top card of their Fate deck, and then play that card. So you get 2 copies of Trickery. Last but not least, we're now going to take a look at the items within Ursula's deck. The first item we're going to take a look at is called Cauldron. So Cauldron you get 1 copy of, and you gain 2 power for each binding contract in your realm. The next one is the Crown. And so this is one of the cards that you will need to win or complete Ursula's objective. And the Crown is this. Look at the top 2 decks of your Fate deck. Either discard both of them or return both of them in any order you wish. The next one is the other piece you need to win, which is the Trident. So when the Trident is played, find King Triton in the hero or Fate deck, play him to the location that you choose the Trident to be on, attach the Trident to him when King Triton is defeated, then the Trident is returned to Ursula at the same location that King Triton was defeated at. Last but not least, we are now going through the cards or the items that are uniquely to Ursula and her playstyle. And we've seen this term many times called binding contract. And so the first set of binding contracts we're going to take a look at is called binding contract with the yellow or orangey color. And you have 2 copies of these. So these binding contracts is the only way Ursula can vanquish heroes. And what they do is this. The orange one here, when the binding contract is played, attach it to a hero, not at the shore. Then, if that hero is moved to the shore, it is vanquished or defeated. So Ursula plays in such a way that it doesn't vanquish by traditionally defeating heroes, but using these binding contracts to move them to specific locations on her game board. The next binding contract we're going to take a look at is the blue binding contract. And the blue binding contract is play the binding contract to any hero who is not at Eric's ship. When that hero is moved to Eric's ship, then they are destroyed. Next one you have is the red binding contract. And the red binding contract is if you attach it to a hero that is not sitting or not placed at the palace, and then when that hero is moved to the palace, destroy that hero. And then last but definitely not least is the green binding contract. And the green binding contract is play to a hero that is not at Ursula's lair. Once that hero is moved to Ursula's lair, then that hero is defeated or vanquished. As we take a look at the hero and Fate deck, we're going to start off with the items within the deck. The first item we're going to take a look at is called Dinglehopper. Dinglehopper, you get 2 copies of it. And when Dinglehopper is played, attach it to a hero. Each time Ursula moves to the location that the hero has this item attached, she loses 1 power. The next item we're going to take a look at is called Snuffblad. And once again, you have 2 copies of this. Snuffblad is when Snuffblad is played, attach it to a hero. The cost to play a binding contract onto that hero is increased by 3, making it more expensive for Ursula to play binding contracts onto any hero. Next, we take a look at the effect cards within the Fate or Hero deck, and we're going to take a look at Return to Form. You have 3 copies of this card. Return to Form is simple. You choose a hero with a strength of 4 or less from the discard pile, play that hero to whichever Ursula's location is on the game board. Next, we move on to taking a look at all the heroes within the Fate and Hero deck. We're going to start off with Scuttle. When Scuttle is played, you may choose an item from Ursula's Fate discard pile and attach it to Scuttle. So if Snuffblad or Dinglehopper was in it, you can take it from this discard pile, attach it to him. Next we take a look at is Grimsby. When Grimsby is played, you may move the lock token to either Ursula's lair or the palace. Next hero we're taking a look at is called Max. If Max is played to Ursula's location, you may move Ursula to any unlocked location. Next, everyone's favorite, Sebastian. When Sebastian is played, you may choose a binding contract that is attached to a hero at an unlocked location, take that binding contract and attach it to Sebastian instead. Next, we have Flounder. When Flounder is played, you may shuffle Ursula's discard pile back to her deck. And then we have Eric. When Eric is played, you may move a hero to any unlocked location. And then we have Ariel. When Ariel is played, you may move an unattached item from an unlocked location to her location. Until Ariel is defeated, Ursula cannot perform the move an ally or move an item action. And then last but definitely not least, we have King Triton. The cost to play a binding contract or effect that targets King Triton is now increased by 1 power, making it more expensive to use any of her spells. So let's begin with our tips and combinations section by looking at the only 2 allies within Ursula's villain deck. And so we are referring to Jetsam and Flotsam. So we're talking about their effect here, which is move a hero from either of their location to an adjacent unlock location. And so we're talking about the positioning of these 2 eels, and we're looking to place them here at Eric's ship and then also here at the shore. And the reason we are looking to place them here is because if a hero was played here at the palace, or if they were played here at Ursula's lair, we can easily move them using this icon here, which allows us to move a hero to any adjacent location. So if Eric was played here, Ursula would come here, activate that action, move Eric over, and then now we can activate Jetsam's ability, move Eric here to the shore, move Jets, and then activate Floatsam's ability, move Eric to Ursula's lair, right? And so depending on whichever binding contract is on Eric, we can now efficiently move him to any of these locations to vanquish our hero. We now take a look at something that is uniquely only to Ursula, which is her lock token that is never removed from the board. And so the card we're taking a look at now is called Change Form. And so Change Form is you move the lock token to either Ursula's lair or to the palace. So this lock token is now currently at the palace. If we played Change Form, it gets moved to Ursula's lair. Let's say we play it again, and then gets moved back to the palace, right? And so the reason why we want to be moving these cards or moving this lock token to either Ursula's lair or the palace is because of the actions that are on it. So we have in Ursula's lair, gain 1 power, activate a card, move an ally or an item, or play a card. Rather, if it was locked, we would then be able to move to the palace, and then we have move an ally or item, fate, our opponents, move a hero that is currently on our board to an adjacent location, or gain 2 power. And so depending on what we need to accomplish, we may need to move certain players around. This is super ideal or super important because part of our gameplay, and we've seen this many times for Ursula, is to move binding contracts from different locations to vanquish or defeat the heroes. We now take a look at the 2 items that Ursula needs to win, which is the Trident and the Crown, and we're going to begin with the Trident. So when the Trident is played, find King Triton and play him to whichever location that the Trident is on, attach a Trident to King Triton, and then when King Triton is defeated, then return the Trident to the same location that King Triton was defeated at. So ideally, the placement of Trident is actually here at Eric's ship. And the reason for that is when we play Triton, we then get to summon King Triton up here. When King Triton is summoned, this Trident then is moved to the top of our game board where King Triton is now in possession. And then what we're looking for, or what we're hoping to eventually draw, hopefully you're prepared for this, is the green binding contract. And so we're going to review the green binding contract here. When the binding contract is played to a hero, attach it, who is not on Ursula's lair. When that hero is moved to Ursula's lair, it is then defeated. So as we take a look at King Triton's current location, he is at Eric's ship. We play binding contract onto King Triton. And then we have either the option of using our wonderful eels, which is Flotsam or Jetsam. If they were down here, we can now move King Triton over to Ursula's lair, which then triggers the binding contract. That destroys King Triton. And then because King Triton was defeated or vanquished at Ursula's lair, the Trident then moves to the bottom of Ursula's lair, as gaining control of the Trident at Ursula's lair. The second card and placement of the card we're looking for is the Crown. And so the Crown is an item that just stays played during the entire time. And where we want to just initially play the Trident is at Ursula's lair. And the Trident, or the Crown, has a unique effect where once you activate the effect, so this icon here is activate. Once you activate the effect of Crown, look at the top two cards of your Fate deck, either discard both the cards or return them to any order to the top of the deck. And so this is important because let's say we had our full, hero deck over here and we activated Crown. Well, the first two cards we draw is Eric and Doppelhopper or Dinglehopper. And at this point, we don't want Eric to be played. We don't necessarily want someone to draw this. So we can just immediately discard one more hero and one more item into the discard pile. We now take a look at the binding contract and its effects for placement. So you'll notice that we currently have the binding contracts placed at very specific locations for very specific reasons. So the reminder, the blue binding contract is if a hero is not on Eric's ship, you can play it to them. But once that hero is moved to Eric's ship, they are vanquished and defeated. So you'll notice that we have the blue binding contract played here at Ursula's lair and also up here at the shore because they are both right beside Eric's ship. The next one we're going to take a look at is the green binding contract, and that is you can attach it to a hero that is not currently on Ursula's lair, but when they are moved to Ursula's lair, they are vanquished. So that's why this one's here. And then we're going to take a look at the red one here. And the red binding contract is for the palace. And so we can play it on any hero that is not on the palace, but when they are moved to the palace, they are vanquished or destroyed. And then last but definitely not least, you'll notice you have two of the orange or yellow contracts. And a reminder, the yellow or orange one is the shore. And so if a hero is on the shore, we cannot play it on them. However, if they are moved to the shore, then they are vanquished or defeated. And that's why they are played here at the palace and also up here at Eric's ship because they are right beside the shore. And so this is the most optimal placement for the binding contracts within Ursula's deck. Now, we now take a look at one of probably the more powerful cards within the Ursula's effect deck or effect cards, which is this one here. And it's called Poor Unfortunate Souls. And so Poor Unfortunate Souls allow us to move each hero that is currently in play to an adjacent unlock location. So as we take a look at our current game state, if we were to play Poor Unfortunate Soul, what it does is this. We start with Flounder. Flounder is currently at Ursula's location. We now move Flounder from Ursula's location to Eric's ship. Triggers the blue contract. This gets discarded. Flounder gets discarded. Next, we take a look at the yellow contract. And this is for the shore. And this is on Sebastian. So we now move Sebastian to an adjacent location, which is the shore. Triggers the binding contract. Binding contract gets discarded. Sebastian is vanquished. Next, we have Max with the green one, and so that one is Ursula's lair. So if we were to move Max to the adjacent Ursula's lair, triggers binding contract, that gets discarded, Max gets vanquished. Now, we take a look at this binding contract here, which is a blue one, and that's on Scuttle. And once again, it's Eric's ship. So we move Scuttle over here to Eric's ship, triggers the binding contract, Scuttle is vanquished. Next, we take a look at the red one, which is for the palace. We are unable at this point to move Grimsby from the shore to the palace to trigger binding contract. And so once again, the wording in Poor Unfortunate Soul is we may move each hero. So at this point, we choose not to move the hero. Last but not least is Eric here at the palace. And so because it is moving to the shore and the shore currently is unlocked, we can now move Eric over to the shore, triggers binding contract, that gets discarded, and Eric is vanquished. So one card, Poor Unfortunate Soul, wipes out, clears most of our game board. We now take a look at a weaker version of Poor Unfortunate Souls, which is called Whirlpool. So Whirlpool is an effect card that allows you to move a hero to any unlocked location. The difference here between this and Poor Unfortunate Soul is that this only allows you to move one hero at a time, versus Poor Unfortunate Soul allows you to move all of your heroes in the same turn. And once again, you have 3 copies of these Whirlpools, so it just allows us to move any of these heroes to wherever we need to. So let's say we play the Whirlpool effect. We can now move Max over to Eric's ship, discarding or activating the contract. Max gets destroyed. So one of the pitfalls of Ursula's playstyle is that we have a locked location and then we have an unlocked location. So as we are trying to progress through the story, we may put the crown here at Ursula's lair because that's where we need it to be. And then we have, our binding contract ready on King Triton. He has a Triton and we're just waiting to move King Triton from Eric's ship over to Ursula's lair. The card that we want to be extremely aware of, and if it is currently not in the discard pile to be super aware of, is Ariel, right? And so when Ariel's played, you may move an unattached item from, any unlocked location to her. And then until Ariel's destroyed, you as an Ursula, cannot perform the move an item or move an ally action. And so this is extremely important is because when Ariel is played, she may move an unattached item from an unlocked location. So if Ariel gets played and drawn, where do you think people will play Ariel? Always at the palace. And the reason for that is because the crown, if we ever play it super early, is always an unattached item. So when Ariel's played, the crown is now moved here to a locked location, right? Or moved to the palace, which is a locked location. And we have now lost the ability to move this item or this crown from the palace all the way back to Ursula's lair. So even though there is a move an option here, even though Ursula's standing here, we can't move her. We can't move until we vanquish Ariel. So then we now have to spend additional resources to putting contracts onto Ariel and then moving Ariel from over here to the palace to the shore so that we can vanquish it. And then after she is vanquished, then we can start moving the crown back over to the shore, back to Eric's ship, and then all the way back to Ursula's lair, which will take 4 turns, which is actually for this game quite a long time. So just to be aware of Ariel and be careful if she is not in your discard pile or the fate discard pile to look out for her as well. So in the very unfortunate incident that the crown has been moved to Ariel's location, let's say we put a binding contract on her and we need some way to move Ariel from the palace over to the shore so that we can trigger the binding contract. One of the very helpful cards in Ursula's deck is she can actually move to either Ursula's lair or let's say the shore. And then this is the card we're looking to play, Grow Giant. Grow Giant allows us to perform an action that is adjacent to Ursula's location. So as we take a look, currently what is not covered here at the palace location is move a hero or draw 2 power. As we play Grow Giant, we're definitely using this here, move a hero to an adjacent location, and we're moving Ariel from the palace over to the shore, triggering the orange binding contract gets discarded, and then Ariel is removed, freeing up our ability to move our crown back over to Ursula's lair. Another very important card to look out for from the hero or fate deck is the item card Snuffblad. And so what Snuffblad does is when it is played to a hero, it increases the cost of your binding contracts by 3. As we've already discussed many times in this video, binding contracts are the only way for you to vanquish your heroes or the heroes. So let's say here Ariel is played and Snuffblad is played on her. So now your traditional binding contract, which takes 2 to use, will now cost you 5 power tokens, right? Unfortunately, if the second Snuffblad is played on the same hero, now it's going to cost you 8 power tokens to use a binding contract on them, which is a lot of resources. So just be very aware of where your Snuffblads are and looking to either discard them or mill them as soon as possible so that when your opponents are drawing their fates, it's not coming up onto your board as well. The last card we want to take a look at within the fate or hero deck is this effect card called Return to Form, which is choose a hero with a strength of 4 or less from Ursula's fate discard pile and then play that hero to Ursula's location. So as you take a look here, you have 3 copies of this card. And these are the heroes within the hero and fate deck of Ursula. You have Eric, who is a strength of 4. You have Grimsby, who is a strength of 2. You have Scuttle, strength of 2. You have Max, a strength of 3. Sebastian, strength of 2, Flounder, strength of 1, and Ariel, strength of 4. Essentially, this is every single hero within the fate deck that Return to Form can be used on. The only card that cannot be drawn is King Triton, who is a strength of 6, right? So even Return to Form is quite powerful because you are now drawing 7 different cards from a discard pile to be filled onto the top part of Ursula's deck. So the last card we're going to take a look at within Ursula's villain deck is this one here called Divination. And so the reason why I'm spending some time talking about this card is because this card is extremely volatile and can be extremely beneficial or extremely bad for you. So we're going to take a look at why. So let's say this is your game state. You're at the very beginning of your game board. You have nothing in your discard pile and you decide, you know what, I need to draw a binding contract just to be safe. I think that's the wrong logic, but you would never do that. But you play Divination for whatever reason. So you play Divination and now you start to draw cards from your deck until you find a binding contract. All the cards that is not a binding contract gets discarded. So the first card is Opportunist, that gets discarded. The Crown, that gets discarded. Grow Giant, that gets discarded. Opportunist again, that gets discarded. Opportunist, that gets discarded. Grow Giant again, that gets discarded. Cauldron, that gets discarded. And then Binding Contract. So this one card, Divination, lost out on, in this exact moment, 7 cards before we drew a binding contract, which from my perspective, losing out the Cauldron and the Crown is definitely not worth 1 binding contract. Now, when is a good time to use Divination? Is when you have a lot of cards. Let's say you have a lot of cards in your discard pile, and you've done the math. You've thought about this, and you said, you know what, I need to draw a binding contract, and there's enough cards currently in my discard pile that I'm making a positive investment. So let's say we play a card now when we have many of our cards, kind of already in the discard pile. We play Divination, so we have Trickery, Whirlpool, Binding Contract. So now with less cards in this pile here, when in our draw pile, we're more likely to draw a binding contract than if many of our cards was kind of stacked up here. So Divination is definitely used, I would say, later in the game versus earlier in the game, because you can always draw binding contracts yourself versus you doing the math or doing the probability of drawing a binding contract versus discarding the number of cards to get the binding contract is something you should be thinking about. That's it. That is Ursula in a nutshell. And so she is different in her playstyle because she relies very heavily on effects or magic to vanquish and to achieve her objective, which speaks to her character anyway, right? Because she is the witch in The Little Mermaid. So many things in the hero deck will slow her down, like some of the items that make the binding contracts more expensive, Ariel, King Triton himself, just to name a few. But at the same time, there's a lot of things within the villain deck to also accelerate her story and her progression as well, like Poor Unfortunate Soul, Cauldron to generate more power, and then the binding contracts with effective placements can definitely get rid of heroes quite easily as well, right? So Ursula itself is quite fun to play, quite different to play, and takes some time getting used to, but as you guys hopefully found this video to be helpful in helping you understand a little bit more about how Ursula plays and how to be efficient with her resources. As always, I appreciate you guys spending time with us. Please drop a comment below. Let me know if I missed something or if you have questions about her deck or certain rules or whatever it may be in terms of play. And then like and subscribe as we have more videos for Disney Villainous coming up on a weekly basis as well. Thank you so much for spending the time in watching this video. I definitely appreciate you guys checking out the channel, swinging by, and hopefully you guys are staying safe, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.